Today we're going to be looking at section 9.3, which is quadratic equations. Hopefully by the end of this section you can say I can solve quadratic equations by graphing or by using square roots. Okay, so first thing we need to know is that when we're solving quadratic equations by graphing, for instance this equation x squared minus 4 equals 0, if we're looking for solutions, if you remember, are values of our x that make the statement true. So we'd be looking for values of x that would make it true. So the solutions are also known as roots of the equations or zeros of the functions. So make sure those things are in your notes. Solutions are also known as roots of an equation or zeros of the function. So what we're going to use today is, if it's asking you to solve by graphing, I am going to ask you that you use the Desmos program. So if we went to the Desmos program and we typed in that equation into here, y equals x squared minus 4. So when we're looking for here are where the x values are 0. Or excuse me, where the y values are 0. What makes this 0? So our two answers in this case would be a -2 and a +2. So if we went back and looked at this equation that we have here, we could see that if I took a -2 and squared it, -2 times -2 is 4, minus 4 is 0. Or if I took a 2 squared, minus 4 is 0 as well. Okay, so what we're going to want to do next, we want to look at these three equations, and we want to see if we can use our Desmos program to solve there. So another thing that I want to look at back on this page, make sure you have this in your notes as well. We're going to be looking for the solutions are the x-intercepts, so make sure that's in your notes so you are able to access that. So what I want you to do now, I want you to use the Desmos program, and I want you to type in these equations one at a time, and I want you to see if you can find the solutions, which would be your roots, which would be your zeros, which would be your x-intercepts for these three. But do them one at a time so you can see them a little easier. Okay, and then pause the video and then come back and see if I get the same thing. Okay, so the first one, we have an x squared minus 16. So if I just change this to a minus 16, and there they show up really nicely, a -4, +4. So that's what your answer is. The first one should have been. The second one, if I have a 3x squared plus 6, well, this is interesting. This one doesn't touch the x-axis. So what does that tell you? That tells you that there is no solution. And actually, there's no real solution. There's imaginary roots, but we aren't going to talk about that today. So this one would have no solution. And then the last one, you should have a -x squared minus 4. And once again, this one would be the same way. It doesn't cross the x-axis, so we would say that it has no solutions. And if you want to be very specific, no real solutions. Okay, that is how we are going to solve using graphing. So we're going to use this Desmos program to solve with graphing. Okay, the next thing we're going to look at is how do I solve a little more algebraic style. So we're going to be using square roots. So if I looked at square roots, how would I solve these? Well, it's very algebraic in manner. So I'm going to add the 16 here to both sides to get the x squared by itself. So to get x squared equals 16, and then to get rid of a squared, we have to take the square root. So we would have x is equal to 4, but we also have to remember that it could also be a -4. So I could write my answer as this, 4, -4, or you could simply say positive or -4 like this. Okay, this next one, you would add the 16, and you'd have 4x squared equals 48. You'd divide by the 4, and you get x squared equals, in this case, 12. So what do I do now? I take the square root of both sides, and for today's purposes, we're going to approximate. So you'd use a calculator, and you'd figure out the square root of 12, and we're going to use the decimal approximation of that answer. So we would say it's approximately 3.46. Okay, we are going to learn a different method, but not right now. So the next one, if you want to take a try at the next two, pause the video and come back and see how you did. Okay, so you should have minus a 192 from each side. And so you get a negative 3x squared equals negative 192 divided by negative 3. And 192 divided by 3 gives us 64. So x squared equals 64, which tells me that x, after I take the square root, would be positive or negative 8. Okay, and then on this one, we should have subtracted 16, and you would have gotten a 2x squared equals 50. If we divide by 2, you get x squared equals 25. If we take the square root, we should get x is equal to a, well, this should have been 25 here. So x would be equal to a positive or negative 5. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense. We're going to do one more. I didn't have it typed on here, but if I gave you this one and I asked you to solve it, we would start out by minusing a 9, and I have x squared equals a negative 9. So in this case, I'd have x, if I take the square root, if I try and take the square root of a negative, this is going to be no real solution, okay, because we cannot take the square root of a negative. If you try to do it on your calculator, you'd get an error message. So hopefully that all makes sense to you. Please come back with questions tomorrow if something is not clear. And that is a wrap.